Hello everyone, and welcome to this UFI Connect session. I'm Christian Druart, UFI Research Manager and also Secretary of the UFI Working Group on Sustainable Development. As of yesterday, we had 115 registrations coming from 30 countries for this session. And I would like to mention a few names I spotted in the list as they contributed to the findings we were presenting and discussing today, either because they were selected as best practice in our 2020 award competition, or because they were member of a jury of that award, or because they took part in one of the regional working group we set up. So besides those who will speak and I will introduce later, let me thank the representatives of ADNEC in Abu Dhabi, AUMA in Berlin, BPA in New York, FIRA Barcelona, FIRA Roma, IFES based in Brussels, Messe München and Messe Marketing in Munich, and RAI in Amsterdam. Also very glad to have Ana Maria from Bogota with us today. She's our regional manager for Latin America. Let me also briefly introduce the UFI Connects. They are a series of online events that we launched, considering that with COVID keeping most exhibition professionals apart, our need to talk, to discuss, and to learn is bigger than ever. So UFI Connects is a program of educational talks, panels, and sessions, and you can see upcoming as well as previous sessions at www.ufi.org/UFI Connects. Also, some quick housekeeping notes. My colleague Karen has put you all on mute while our speakers are talking. We have scheduled time for discussion today as well, and please use the chat function to ask your question. My colleague Gosha will help me pick them up, and I will call you up when we get there. Karen will then activate your microphone, and you will be seen on the screen if you have your camera on. So Pascal, can you please put slide 2 on? And I will introduce the session. So today's session is about waste management in the exhibition industry. Several UFI members asked us to work on this issue, and we set up several regional groups around the world with the support of Greenview and Impact Zero, both members of the UFI Sustainable Development Working Group. In parallel, as mentioned before, we selected waste management as a 2020 annual award competition. UFI and Greenview consolidated their findings in a report that was released last month. And this session is to focus on Europe and the Americas, considering that we ran a similar session focused on Asia Pacific and the Middle East 2 weeks ago. Our idea is that those companies who could maybe take advantage of these troubled times to work on improving this aspect of live events. So Olivia from Greenview is our first speaker today. Greenview is a sustainability consulting and research firm based in Singapore. Olivia, please go ahead now.
Hi, Christian. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to see all of you here today. First of all, I just check that everybody can hear me okay. Is that all right, Christian? Yeah, fine. Excellent, great, thank you. So just bear with me while I share my screen with you. There we go. Okay, so as Christian said, I work for a company called Greenview. We're a sustainability consultancy. We are based in Singapore. However, I am actually in London, so I'm not talking to you from the middle of the night. For me, it's late afternoon. So it's great to see you all here. We were delighted to help UFI pull this report together. Okay, bear with me 1 minute. Sorry. Right, hopefully that will work. Thank you. Right, so to get on with the presentation. So waste generation and waste diversion are global issues, as I'm sure everybody is aware. According to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, if we don't take serious action on waste, there may be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. According to the UN, a third of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, which is about 1.3 billion tonnes a year. So it's a big issue, and it's particularly challenging versus the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in particular goal number 12. And as I'm sure you're all aware, it's a prevalent issue in the exhibition industry, which is based on multiple events, fast turnaround, and its international nature. And in fact, there is one data point that suggests that the exhibition industry generates over 600,000 tonnes of waste each year. But significant progress is possible through developing goals and waste management policies, and that's what we're going to talk about today. As Christian mentioned, UFI has been taking actions on waste management, including making it the theme of the 2020 Sustainable Development Award, which involved, and the pulling together of this report, which involved interviews and workshops with participants from all across the world. It's worth saying that this is a work in progress, this report, and it will be updated as new issues come to light and new solutions are discovered and action is taken. The first thing we did in pulling this report together was to look at the regulatory landscape. And what we found was that there really is no one-size-fits-all approach to regulation. But these were the kind of broad conclusions that emerged from the discussions. First of all, the regulatory environment varies hugely depending on the region, country, and even city where a venue is located. Regulations in Asia appear to be less onerous than those in Europe or the Americas. And actually, we're going to hear a bit later about some of the work that's going on in the Europe around regulations. But in addition, there may be a mix of national and local level regulations to be followed as well. Secondly, penalties tend to be attached to national state level waste disposal regulations, but enforcement varies, and certainly not all regulations are enforceable by penalties. Next, targets are not the norm when it comes to waste regulations around the world, as the focus tends to be on practices. However, the EU, which seems to be leading the way in terms of its waste legislation, has identified targets for municipal waste in its updated directive in 2018. And then typically waste management regulations don't relate specifically to the exhibitions industry, but are much broader in scope and cover items such as sorting, recycling and removal. And this can sometimes have implications in terms of a venue's ability to comply. For example, if waste needs to be sorted within the venue, there may not be the time or space to do this. And then what we found was that the landscape is evolving fast, especially as it relates to plastics. There are new regulations and laws emerging all the time, with a particular focus on single-use plastics or disposable cups. In some areas, food waste is also rising up the regulatory agenda. The industry associations in some countries are responding to this potential increase in regulation by drafting charters, which members can, or in some cases have to sign up to. And in this way, the industry will be ahead of the game if new laws are put in place and can take the opportunity to feed into public policies as they're being drawn up. But at the same time, there was a recognition that while regulation should not be the driving force behind change, it can catalyse action across the sector, and in particular government actions which incentivise companies to address waste management. The next thing we looked at was what were the challenges in waste management, and on this slide you can see an overview of some of the key challenges which were identified in the Green Venue report, which is an annual state of sustainability in venues that Greenview puts together. This covers all kinds of issues such as improper waste sorting by staff, limited access to organisations which conduct diversion, issues around measurement and data, and some of the communications and materials issues. But what we found that actually talking to all the stakeholders for the purposes of this report, that three common challenges emerged again and again, and I'm sure this will be of no surprise to any of you. But the three most pressing and common challenges were around the physical problems around stands and their materials, engaging the whole range of stakeholders with sustainability in planning and execution, and of course waste management forms part of that, and then working with the exhibitors and visitors on site. And just to look a little bit more detail at each of these, around exhibition stands, it was largely around the materials used, and most commonly wood, which is heavy and bulky and therefore difficult to dispose of. Also a lack of understanding or awareness of sustainability from those commissioning exhibition stands. And again, also amongst suppliers. And then added to that is the cost of sustainable materials, and then how you can dispose appropriately of stands in short time frames. And often the responsibility for disposal isn't clear. So those were the key issues coming out around exhibition stands. And then engaging stakeholders. And this was one of the key overriding barriers to achieving change across all the regions. And it was particularly strong in Asia, where it was felt that there's a need for society as a whole to change its attitude towards and its behavior regarding waste. But again, it came out in all regions. And here's a couple of quotes from stakeholders about how they felt about this. And really, it was about how we can embed sustainability and waste management in the whole planning and delivery process. And that kind of leads on to how you can work with exhibitors and visitors in order to raise awareness of waste management. And really, this understanding of sustainability tends to be particularly low amongst the exhibitor group, and particularly as it relates to the stand, its materials and disposal. And here we've got a number of approaches which were suggested as to how this challenge could be addressed around raising general awareness through communications. Some talked about development of certifications to identify sustainable stands, and then also this idea of rewards and incentives for embracing sustainability. So, for example, stands that were sustainable, those companies may receive reduced booking fees for the following year's event, and that kind of thing. And we'll talk more about some of these solutions in the discussion part. And then the report looks in some detail at best practices to address the challenges of waste management. And these all come from the submissions in the Sustainable Development Award that Christian talked about already. And it's great that we've got so many of the finalists here on this webinar, and some we're going to talk to later. So just to go through these quickly, they're all in the report in some detail, and in fact will be published in more detail in a compendium, I believe, which will come out later this year. But just to whiz through some of the best practices that emerged from around the world. And first of all, we're looking at this issue of embedding waste management throughout the event planning cycle. And in India, the IMTMA, there was a nice example of how they incentivize exhibitors to proactively embrace eco-design by use of an award. In Thailand, the Royal Paragon Hall brings the whole team together at the beginning of a project to discuss sustainability, including waste management, and make a plan to embed it in the process. In Greenbuild in the USA, and we'd like to have Amanda here, we'll talk to her about this in a bit more detail in a minute, but they have bi-weekly sustainability meetings in the year running up to the event, which includes all stakeholders, including, for example, the show decorator, building management, catering vendors, and that kind of thing. And then in the Olympia here in the UK, who we're also going to talk to a bit more later, they offer a comprehensive post-event sustainability report to each exhibitor, or for each exhibition, sorry, which is free of charge, which is a great way of communicating sustainability impact of each event. And then looking at how various organisations engage with delegates to reduce waste. There were several kind of different and innovative approaches here. ADNEC in the UAE has 8 reverse vending machines throughout the venue which accept plastic bottles and cans. And these are great because they not only increase awareness of recycling, but also they result in cash donations which they make to the Red Crescent. And then we've got the example of the R&C market research company in Russia that for their annual event, they only recommend hotels that have progressive sustainability practices. So that's kind of looking beyond the event itself, but where delegates are staying. In Sweden, at the Stockholmsmässan, they placed segregating recycling bins in all public areas so customers can sort waste in 4 different fractions, and staff in the venue wear vests with a big text saying, "Ask me about recycling." So there it's really front and center as the exhibition takes place. And then another example from Greenbuild USA, which is the Bring Your Own Bottle initiative, which is all about reducing single-use plastics in bottled water. And then there's the issue of using technology and innovation to develop solutions. And the first one was from Process Chanel International in France, where they have a great initiative whereby they reutilize paper and stamp materials and repurpose them as furniture, as you can see here in the picture, with no chemicals. And this is really embracing the circular economy side of things. And then FinTech in Singapore, unsurprisingly, have a whole load of digital solutions that reduce waste, including electronic marketing and digital materials on site, digital mapping, and that kind of thing. And then moving over to Fiera Roma in Italy, they have developed an electromechanical composter which transforms organic waste into compost. And I think they managed to compost around 80% of their organic waste in that way. And then in India from PS Bedi, this is a great example where they've processed and repurposed over 2,000 tons of paper to produce paper goods, which generates over $100,000 annually, which supports the operation of the paper plant, but it also funds treatments for former drug addicts who are also employed by the plant. So there's a kind of environmental and social angle to that one. And then looking at disposal, carrying on looking at disposal of waste, the ICC in Sydney, and this is common to a lot of venues, but the ICC has the donation program, and in 2019, I think this was, they managed to donate 26 tons of leftover items, and particularly food and meals, which they donated to local charities. And similarly, RAI in Amsterdam has a very strategic approach to its donation. As you can see here, they have 4 types of waste to be donated, and they're very focused in how they deal with each type based on when it occurs, and that's very successful. And then finally, and I just like to flag this because I think it's really important to note that small things really matter. And this example again from the ICC in Sydney, where they removed complimentary mints, and that eliminated over 500,000 individual plastic wrappers across the year. So even the small things matter. So what conclusions can we come to in all of this? So as I mentioned, this is a work in progress, and the discussions which fed into this report, combined with the findings from the Green Venue report and the information from the best practice case studies, have allowed us to identify a number of potential focus areas, which are specific challenges and solutions that can be addressed in the future. And just to go through them one by one very quickly, this includes circular economy, so the avoidance, collection and treatment of waste to reduce waste to zero, and then engaging with exhibitors and visitors to promote the minimization of waste, recycling and responsible disposal of waste. And then third, the whole area of measurement, which is really fundamental, and measuring different materials, the amounts generated, diversion rates, etc., to enable tracking and monitoring. And then looking at solutions which address practical issues such as the space and time constraints and where waste is sorted, that kind of thing. And then more detail looking at the donation of community programs where excess waste can be reused or repurposed. And finally, the technological solutions such as sustainable materials or digital delivery. So These different focus areas will be taken on and discussed by UFI Sustainable Development Working Group, and plans made for future work in all or some of these areas. But that's just a quick overview of the report. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to discussing some of the areas in a bit more detail now with our panelists.
Thank you, Olivia, for this detailed overview of the report. Before moving to our panel discussion, just would like to add that indeed the report is a first edition, meaning that we will enrich it with time. And if you have any comment, please send it to chris@ufi.org. As you also mentioned, Olivia, this surely applies to the conclusion of the report, which calls for next steps that the UFI working group will look into. But let's move to the panel now, and I'm very happy to introduce by alphabetical order of their name, Jesus Herrera. He is the CEO of Impact Zero, based in Mexico, and he led the working group in Central and South America. We've also got Sean Richards. She's head of sustainability at Olympia London, and Olympia London was finalist of our 220 award competition. We've got Lucy Ryan, sustainability manager for the region EMEA at Informa in the UK, who was part also of our working group for Europe. And we've got Amanda Simons. She's sustainability manager for Greenbuild in the USA, which we mentioned, who was finalist also of our competition. And important to mention, Greenbuild was the only pure organizer, I mean, not also a venue among the finalists. And last but not least, we have Barbara Weissecker. She's the Secretary General of EEIA, the alliance between UFI and EMECA. She prepared the work related to the legislation in the EU. So Olivia, please go ahead with the panel.
Great, thank you, Christian. So I was going to go to Amanda, first of all, from Greenbuild in the USA. And I think, so as Christian mentioned, you were the only sort of pure event organizer. I think also what's really interesting about your event is that you move venue every year. And I just wondered if you could talk through some of the key initiatives that you're doing in the waste management area and the impact that that's having.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here. Yeah, so I work with a consulting firm called Honeycomb Strategies, and we've worked with Greenbuild I've been on the show for almost 9 years. So I am their main sustainability manager there. Yeah, so we move from venue to venue every year. And I think one of the key points is we have really extensive stakeholder engagement strategy that we've created over the years. We start very early in the process, probably a year out, leading up to the event, and we focus solely on waste with them. And that includes everyone from the general service contractor, the venue, cleaning staff, housekeeping, the hotels, exhibitors, attendees, everyone, waste haulers, processors, and local nonprofits. And by creating those connections to those groups at the different venues, we've curated some long-standing relationships with those venues over the years, and they've been able to keep those going. So they have now their direct line of contact to nonprofits locally that they deal with. Their housekeeping staff now has been trained very extensively on managing waste. We have a pretty detailed procurement strategy that we've set out over the years. So we worked in partnership with Freeman probably 10 or 12 years ago and came up with a list of prohibited materials and then alternatives. And every year we review those materials and those guidelines as things change and evolve and what markets can take certain things and what can't. And then those get translated out to all the exhibitors of what they can use and what they can bring in as well. And we share that with all of our attendees. Yeah, and I think that sort of has also led Freeman to expand the sustainable materials that they offer, which has been really great because as an organizer And for a big show, we consistently kept asking and asking. And we work with other events as well, and those clients also kept asking. So now they have a wider range of sustainable materials, which was great.
That's great.
So
can I just ask
yeah,
a question in that, so that's a really great sort of way of engaging stakeholders, communicating and that kind of thing. How do you go about, or do you go about measuring waste?
Yeah, so we measure, so we look at everything that comes in. We measure total waste footprint, and then we look at, we do like a direct weight. So because we're in constant contact with the haulers, as well as our general service contractors, so we look at the total waste footprint, what's being recycled, what's being composted, what's being donated. And then in the last couple of years, we've followed a certification that GBCI has put out called the True Zero Waste Certification. And that also looks at what we are eliminating and sort of that waste stream as well. So we don't count that as like our traditional waste diversion, but we look at that number as well. So yeah, so and our diversion rate averages for the show about 85% diversion rate. And so for venues that we go to, they're around, some are as low as like 5% diversion rate, and some are around 40, but we typically bump that up. And on average, we have about a pound of overall waste per participant and about 5 pounds of waste, landfill waste, for the duration of the show per participant.
Wow, okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. So moving on to Jesus now in Mexico, perhaps you could just tell us from the broader sort of regional perspective, because I know you spoke to many players across Central and South America. What are some of the trends or best practices that you're seeing in that region?
Hi, Olivia. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you, sharing the findings of the report in order to contribute to reduce the waste. And in order to put you in a context, Latin America generates around 10% of the total waste around the world. And just 10% of that waste is recycled. So there is a huge opportunity area for manage the waste. Another good finding is that everybody has the diversion of the waste in at least 3 different categories, which is good. Everybody has the KPIs of the waste that they are generating. They have some policies. All the companies that we interview has a policy, and they share and make a campaign in order to raise awareness, in order to connect with the exhibitors and also the participants. Another interesting part is that in Argentina, they start to manage the waste at La Rural before the government start to create a system for the city in order to manage the waste. So as soon as the government aligned with the program, the La Rural, the convention center, was already prepared for that. And they made, because the well-being and because they know that is the right thing to do. Another case is in Mexico, where at the World Trade Center of Mexico City, where they started also to manage the waste around 7 or 10 years ago, but they do with a focus of making business with the waste that they are collecting and selling. So it's a different approach. Both are showing the commitment, and we can see on everybody that all the convention center and all the UFI members are aware about the waste generation, and the regulations are not ready. So the companies are doing it because they know that it's something good for the business, not because it's something that the norms have to be aligned to. So that's an interesting finding. There are a lot of opportunity areas, definitely, when we compare with Sydney, that was the one that won the prize. So, but I think the sector and the region is working on the good direction.
Yeah, no, that's great. There definitely seems to be a great energy in what's going on in Central and South America, certainly from reading the report that you pulled together. It's great. So a lot of the findings focused around this issue of stakeholder engagement, and something that both of you have touched on already. And I wanted to move over now to Sian in the UK and Olympia to talk about this in a bit more detail, because you must work with a whole host of different stakeholders, but you have managed to have zero waste to landfill for the last 9 years, I think it is. Can you tell us a bit about how you managed to achieve that and some of the learnings that you've had with all that experience?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, as Olivia said, we've been achieving zero to landfill for nearly a decade now. And one of the key way that we do this is to choose our waste management contractors very carefully. So we don't practice much separation at the venue because we don't have an awful lot of space. So the majority of our waste goes in compactors to reduce journeys, to Power Day, which is a local waste management plant. And there they have state-of-the-art technology, separates out all the waste streams and recycles. And then I think it's about, well, it's under 2% of the waste goes to RDF, waste for energy, and over 98% is recycled. In addition, we separate out all our food waste, which goes to anaerobic digestion to create fertilizer and biofuel. And we have started separating out one or two other waste streams where we can, where we have space, such as drinks cups. So we have a membership with a company called, or an organisation called Simply Cups, and we have dedicated waste bins on the exhibition floor. Customers can pop their lids and their cups in there, in the knowledge that they'll be fully recycled in a closed loop system into other products. But to be honest, all of this you know, is fine, but I still feel that communication and engagement with organisers is actually the key to all of this. In fact, engagement with all of our stakeholders, because we do need their cooperation in separating out food waste, for example, putting cups in the right bin. And all of this is part of our sustainability programme, which we call the Grand Plan. And we have 3 focus areas, which are community, environment and education, or engaged, educate, empower, to give it its full title. So really engaging with organisers throughout the planning process, on site as well, even talking to exhibitors on the floor, talking to contractors about you know, trying to preempt issues before they arise. And of course, handing out financial penalties should we have to. But we prefer to engage and collaborate with our clients to make sure that initially waste is reduced as far as possible, and then anything that is left over is actually dealt with in the correct way.
And are those, I mean, how easy is it to engage with your clients? Is this a topic that they feel similarly sort of engaged with and passionate about as you do, or is it you know, a bit of an uphill struggle?
I think it's changed over the last few years. I think initially there were a few organising companies who were very passionate. Some of them are here today. And so, you know, that was pushing against an open door, but we've had to work very hard with some of our clients to get them to see that really this is a behaviour that we want to see at Olympia London, and you know, we want to bring everybody along with us. So we have worked really hard, and I think things have improved immeasurably, in fact, over the last, well, even couple of years.
Yeah, the David Attenborough effect.
Yes, totally.
Anyway, so thanks, Sian. So talking about clients who are engaged and active, come to you, Lucille, and Informa. And perhaps you could tell us about the work that you're doing with some of your exhibitors, because again, that came up time and time again as one of the key challenges. So what have you been doing to engaging exhibitors in this issue of waste management?
Yeah, and I think, you know, from our point of view of Informa, our real kind of focus is naturally on preventing the waste. You know, how can we actually just stop it existing in the first place? And I think that's really reflected in our Faster Forward commitments we just announced earlier this year, where we want to halve all of our waste by 2025, and we want to get to zero waste across the whole company by 2030. And to get to those targets, one of the biggest, trickiest issues that we're all aware of in the industry is the use of disposable stands by exhibitors. And, you know, these are the stands that are built to be only used once. They're absolutely completely taken apart and destroyed after just the 3 days of the show. And we estimate that just a medium-sized 40-meter squared stand can have 4 tons of waste, just that one stand of waste wood. And this is where it's always been very tricky to get exhibitors to be engaged with. And I think it's something that we need to try and get better at. But I think what we have learned by focusing on this for the last kind of 5 years is that there's 3 key things really. One, we had to deal with it ourselves first. So before we could start talking to our exhibitors about how they build their stands, we needed to make sure that what we built as the organizer, our shell schemes, our feature areas, our registrations, were already proving that you can be structurally waste-free and still have wonderful builds. And then we needed to be talking about that. We needed to be sharing that with them and setting that ethos of that, yes, this is a sustainable event, this is a part of how we deliver it, so that it was starting to be a part of the mindset of the event and all of our stakeholders, including the exhibitors. And then it was really, the second point was around data and gathering that information. And, you know, the more we could understand exactly who was using a disposable stand, the better, because it really varies per show. You can have 2 shows at the exact same venue, and they can have completely different numbers of disposable stands. There might be none used at one show and then actually a lot at the other. So you have to be able to understand the level and who's using it to be able to find those trends and have that strategy right for that individual event. And also, the more your operations team and your sales team can understand which specific exhibitor is using a disposable stand, they can have a really informed and impactful conversation instead of just having to rely, without that understanding, on a blanket communication to everyone. Because the thing is, the exhibitor's probably unlikely to know if they're using it or not quite often. So they won't engage with a blanket communication to everyone. But if that sales team and operations team can talk to them and say, look, you're missing out on lots of benefits by not moving across, then you've got much more likely to have that behavioural change that you're wanting to drive. And that's the third point. You've really got to lead with the exhibitors about the benefits that they're missing out on. And I think whatever issue that you're trying to engage your exhibitors with, you've got to find the solution that not only gets rid of the issue, the waste, but also delivers a better customer experience for them. You know, and you've got to lead with those benefits for them to be engaging and want to have that conversation with you and to drive that change. And that's why we're just launching a campaign across all of our events in EMEA called Better Stands, you know, and we're leading with the information that if you're an exhibitor that's not already using a reusable stand, you're missing out on benefits of better value, better quality, better time efficiency, you know, better safety, as well as better sustainability. And by leading by those other factors, we're hoping will drive that big change that will kind of get us to that point of just no one using a disposable stand.
Yeah, that's quite a campaign to be kicking off right now, isn't it? But it's really exciting, and I think that the whole issue of ROI is so critical, yeah, isn't it? And experience, and so kind of in that vein, I wanted to come back to you, Amanda, and talking about not so much the exhibitor experience, but the visitor experience, because obviously visitors are also a fairly significant generator of waste. And I don't know, in Greenbuild, one might assume that your visitors are all very plugged into sustainability. I don't know if they are or not, but are they, and how do you work with them, or how do you engage with the visitors?
Yeah, I think we've trained them over the years, but you know, because we move and we are getting new folks every time. So again, we engage really early and we look at multiple opportunity areas to connect. So we send out a lot of pre-communication. And then what we've done is we just keep a really consistent program and messaging for our attendees at the show. So we have the same sort of color schemes for our waste bins, same sort of signage. And though we go to different venues, we really try and keep that same thing and work with the venue to sort of align with that. We also have volunteers, so that really helps in terms of at each waste bin what visitors are going to get rid of. There's somebody there to sort of help them. We don't have them at every station, but we really try. And then we make it fun and provide incentives to participate. So we offer back of house tours to anyone at the show, any hoteliers, anyone sort of that would be attached to the events industry, to come and like see how we plan for waste, see the systems, go back of house, see how we sort, just to like get a real feel and understanding. In the last couple of years, we've also done a pledge for folks, so actions that they can do to be more sustainable at the destination. And then again, some of those incentives like providing discounts for public transportation, or discounts for if you have your water bottle and you bring it and you use water, you can get $5 off somewhere at a restaurant or something somewhere. So we've done all kinds of that. We've created awards, recognition, and we have a huge interactive sustainability wall as well. So we do activations and then this huge pledge wall that's very visual, and it's right in the middle of our exhibit hall. So people are just very much engaged, and if they ever don't know, they can see. And then the cool thing since COVID is that we've moved those actions to our virtual event. And changed it so what people could do at home while they're there, ways to just think about while you're participating virtually, food choices or shorter showers or things like that, just to be kind of aware at what you can do at home too.
That's really interesting, the kind of unexpected opportunity, isn't it? Because I think often there's a disconnect between what people do at home and what they do away from home. Certainly in travel, that's the case. Thank you, that was really interesting. So I guess I wanted to move on now, and sort of sitting behind all of this is the government regulation and the lawmakers and the policies that are moving towards more robust actions in terms of waste management. And I think there's a lot of example, and Jesus talked about it, in Latin America, where the industry is ahead of the game and actually doing things that aren't required before the legislators catch up with them. And there's lots of great examples of that around the world. But I wanted to now just come to Barbara and look at it from the EU perspective, because the EU is the one entity which is really leading the way in this. And Barbara, just kind of give us an overview of what's happening in terms of developments in the EU, but also how this might impact the industry, and what, if anything, the industry needs to do kind of to represent itself more effectively towards government, or the EU in particular, to make sure that actually the outcome is beneficial for everybody.
Yes, Olivia, thank you for giving me the floor. I'd like to draw attention to, as you said, the regulations in the EU. Already in the EU, the regulations were relatively strict for waste, knowing that some countries and some players always find a good way around. But in principle, the regulations are so strict that already we have at all the venues, the waste separation bins, and all these things are in place. And of course, we try not to have bad materials that cannot be separated, etc. However, now with the EU having this very competitive goal of becoming carbon free by 2050, there is a huge package of legislation and of policies coming up, which will, among others, concern the waste management. And so the panorama is relatively complex. And I'll just explain you a little bit the let's say the scenario, and will not go into the single regulations, but you can read all this in the report, and then also you have the links for the exact goals, etc. Just to put you a little bit on in the broader picture. So there is a legislative package that's called the Circular Economy Package that affects several directives, and there are two related flagship policies. So there is this bigger package of legislation. It's called Waste Package, and it concerns 4 directives. Directives are pieces of legislation that will then be translated into national legislation. There are little margins where you can, perhaps regulate a few. There are, well, some liberties to add something or to be a little bit more flexible on the implementation, but they give the framework. And there is one on waste, one on packaging waste, one on the landfill of waste, and one on end of life vehicles, batteries, and things like that are more electronic waste. So there are 2 of those that interest us most. It's on waste and on packaging waste, obviously, because this is what our industry is producing. And then around that or above that, you have the policy for the European Green Deal. You might have heard of it. It was presented end of last year, and it's the big roadmap to make all economy and industry sustainable in Europe. And connected to that, of course, there is a new industrial strategy that sort of aims at making the European economy and industry more competitive and more climate neutral, and to shape also Europe's digital future. So all this is connected. However, now, as we're talking on waste, I'd like to present very briefly the main traits of the Waste Directive and the Packaging Waste Directive. So the idea is that this package of the 4 directives should lead to more recycling of waste and enhance the circular economy. The waste package, the Waste Directive sets requirements for the producer responsibility scheme, meaning that it's not the consumer who uses a product, or for example the exhibitor who has a stand that is responsible, but the responsibility is taken back to the producer of whatever material it is. So it's really a change of mindset, and so that products from the very beginning have to be conceived in a different way. So the producer's responsibility is very important, and then in principle we must all try to contribute to waste prevention and to the reusability and the recyclability of products. So from the very beginning of a product conception, all these items should be taken into account to just come to waste prevention in general. Everything should become more resource efficient, durable, repairable, for example, reusable, and capable of being upgraded. This is also very important if you think of which materials you can use, if you can then do some have a secondary use for these items. So in principle, it's about materials, or to prevent materials to become waste at all. So not to have waste anymore. That's the main item. And the same is true also for the food waste, as this was mentioned, and of course also for dangerous materials. Then to make it more concrete, there are targets for the municipal waste and the recycling. So reduction of landfill, of course, and increasing of the recycling quota, and also separate collection of more materials than now. Of course, we had now paper and glass and metal and general waste and plastics, etc. And there will be separate collection of textiles, mandatory, and also bio waste in a more distinguished form. And of course, dangerous materials will also be subdivided into different items. So in our report, you can also see the the targets more detailed. This directive should have been already translated into international legislation, which means that it's in force in the EU already, but there are grace periods for the changeover, etc. So this is to come. It's something we've been having, but it will be enhanced. And of course, the aim is to become totally carbon free. The second one is also important for us, as exhibits are being shipped and stands have to be packed in order to be transported to the venues, and then the packaging of the stand is also, of course, waste or not waste. So there are also different measures and programs and incentives to increase producer responsibility and also to reduce the packaging to the absolute minimum, not to, of course, endanger the whatever the product is that needs to be packed, but to really not make it big and super safe, but just use the minimum. To limit the weight, for example, and the volume, and to minimize also, again, the content of dangerous substances. There you can find also in the annex of the report very detailed schemes on how much or how the targets are for the recycling. So for all packaging, for example, by 2030, it will be 70%. That's the recycling. Plastic 55, wood 30, metals 80, etc. You can check that. And also, of course, we have to think about all these targets when designing stands or when well, planning the whole meeting, of course. That's very important because we cannot just not fulfill the legislation, then we'll have, of course, also fines to bear. So what is also important, the producers of the packaging will have to contribute financially to the, well, if they have to go or take them back for the recycling. That's also clear. And many of the items that still go to the municipal waste will not be accepted in landfill anymore. This is also something we have to bear in mind. If we have some leftovers, we just cannot bring them to municipal waste, whatever the organization is, because they will not accept it anymore. Therefore, later in the last consequence, will be there on the venue, the organizer or the venue or even the stand owner with some waste, and no one will take it. So therefore, it is really urgent to read it and to adapt everything to that. So it's about reducing the costs and bearing the costs, and from the very beginning thinking about which materials to use, a real shift in mind. The other question you were saying, how can we better present ourselves?
Yeah, I think I might, so Barbara, thank you so much. I think that was a really great overview of everything that's going on, and the whole shifting mindset thing is so important. I'm actually going to stop you there. And so thank you so much. But and as Barbara said, there's a whole appendix to the report focusing on the EU, which is really interesting, and certainly the way the world is going. So that'd be great. But I'm going to stop now because we're getting almost to the hour, and we wanted to open the floor to some questions. And I know Christian has had a question that he's burning to ask the panelists. So go on, Christian, over to you.
Yes, sorry to interrupt a little bit. You, Barbara, it's all very dense, but very interesting and useful. And indeed, the report is worth reading for this. Yes, we almost reached the hour, and there was a question. We haven't received many questions in the chat, but I have one for each of you, in fact, which is a tricky one. Even champions sometimes fail, and I would like you to quote an example of an initiative or a project that turned out not to work, because sometimes you also learn that way. So shall I ask Jesus, maybe among your different clients, if you have spotted such a case?
Definitely. I think what I can share is that the companies that try to create a penalty, or the convention centers that want to penalize the exhibitors who leave all the materials on the floor after each event, we haven't found a real methodology or the right process that can be implemented in order to reduce the waste and make responsible for that waste to the exhibitors. So I think we are still searching in the region for this model of it will be maybe an incentive if the exhibitors manage their waste right, or a penalty. So they haven't found the right model. So I think that could be an opportunity area.
Very interesting topic indeed. I remember taking part in a group in Europe where we had similar reactions from different countries, where some were saying we need to, it worked because we gave penalties, but others said, no, we need to provide some incentives, otherwise it wouldn't work. So again, probably not one approach fits all. But interesting area indeed. Lucy, are you ready to answer my question?
Yeah, and I'd definitely follow up the fine things just on that one before the one I had in mind. I do think it cannot work, but I also think on the other hand, when we've tried it with purely incentives of doing sustainable stand awards, with that you find you just encourage the people who are already looking at it to get even better, but you fail to actually influence the people who aren't interested in sustainability. And they're the ones that are the trickiest to hard to get to. So you kind of, pure carrot doesn't get you either there, and pure, fines doesn't get you either there. I think it's really much a balance in between that's kind of going to be the one that gets you there. But the one I wanted to kind of say for this one was a tricky thing that we all kind of fall for quite often is something will be, you think you found your solution because it's recyclable or it's biodegradable, and it's very easy to then think, okay, great, problem solved, move on to the next thing. And we've seen a few times, well, actually that's all very good, but you've then got to find, well, is the processes there, is the systems there for it actually to be recycled or to be biodegraded? And quite often that isn't there, and you've got to then work to get that established first. Having the right materials, the first step, then you have to have the right processes that can actually be dealt with. And then the third one that you often get tripped over about is you could have had all the right processes in place, but then you have to go back and check, well, did it actually happen? Because so often you find that, all best intentions, you've got the right material, you've got the right process, but something went wrong or somewhere along the lines and it didn't actually happen. And it's really following that down. And it's always, as soon as someone says, oh, it's recyclable, you just got to keep going. You've got to follow it down further. That's always something everyone gets tripped up on all the time, I think.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, we haven't got time, in fact, to go to the other panelists. And we've had a question also from Justin that we'll try to answer directly after the hour. I would like to thank everybody for joining this session. And maybe, Pascal, if you can put the last slide on, I could also mention the next UFI Connect if we have one already planned. And again, if anyone has any question that comes to their mind after the session, don't hesitate to send it to us at chris@ufi.org, and we'll make sure that we get the answer, including yours, Justin. So you will also be receiving a survey with our research partner, Explore. So please use it to tell us insight into how you felt about this session. And you can also follow us on Twitter. And last but not least, we wanted to thank our diamond sponsors, Thailand Redefine, the Qatar National Tourism Trust, Shenzhen World, and Freeman. So thank you very much again for joining. You will be receiving also the recording of that session, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.